So this ride height is a little bit lower than expected, and I would expect we have at least 500 or 600 pounds between engine and turbo setup and everything like that going up front. I weigh 289. I am a small boy, so I'm gonna go ahead and jump in here just to see how low this thing goes. That is ridiculous. That is, how low is this? I can't even see it right now.
It's pretty low. It's pretty low. Now let's complete the weight of the setup now.
Yeah, this is gonna be about 600. What's going on, guys? Back in the shop again. Last episode ended in a little bit of disappointment. We weren't able to turn the car into a roller. As you can tell, rear end still isn't in it because we were waiting on some parts. Now, we went ahead and got a transverse mount kit from Midwest Chassis. It's laid out right here. So it's actually gonna end up turning our shocks 90 degrees. We do need to drill one hole into the rear end there to go ahead and locate it. That way it doesn't rotate on us. The other thing we were waiting on is from SJM Manufacturing. It's the axle bearing spacer. So this affects our final brake offset and how everything's fitting there. We'll go ahead and explain to you guys with a dial caliper exactly what we're talking about. And while we're at it, we're still here with more shop upgrades. Got another box of lights sitting in the corner over there, and ended up getting a new banner actually. So little touches here and there, still need to do some paint work, but shop's rolling. So we're gonna go ahead and start assembling this rear end, get it thrown up into the car. All right, so we decided to start with the Midwest Chassis transverse shock mount kit. We had to bend this at a slight angle to fit our QP Moser 9. We already went ahead and did that to both of them. So I'm just gonna go ahead and tighten this down real quick so we can locate the hole we need to drill. It's just one single hole so that this thing doesn't rotate. Tighten this up real quick. So it's important that we tighten this thing up because we're going to need to have the exact angle that we need when we're drilling this. I'm going to grab the micrometer real quick. I'm just going to measure basically the side. Looks like we're straight right there. All right, in order to fit our hardware, we're gonna have to drill one hole into the rear end. Gonna drill a small pilot hole real quick before we go ahead and take the bracket off and use the correct sized drill bit. After the pilot hole is drilled, we just need to go ahead and finish it up to fit our 5/16 hardware. Now that we got the hole drilled for that top bolt, I'm going to snug this up, just lightly hand tight. I want to locate that top bolt first in order to get this thing to really sit down nice and flush. Just some 1/2 inch stainless hardware that Midwest Chassis provides. I'm just going to go ahead and hit that bottom bolt with an impact now. Go ahead and really torque this thing down. It's all nylon locking hardware, so you know it should pretty much never need to come off again. This is all really nice zinc coated, so I shouldn't really have to throw any paint on this stuff either. So finally, after forever, it feels like we're going to get these AFCOs mounted up to the car in their permanent location. So it's the Midwest Chassis mount accommodates a 1 inch wide bottom mount. Again, they provide super nice hardware for everything. Everything's zinc plated. Everything makes up super nice. And there we have it. The AFCOs come with a Heim joint pretty much on the bottom. So I mean, this thing has the ultimate range of movement. I'm just gonna go ahead and do the same thing on the other side now. All right, now that we got the transverse mounts all bolted up on the rear end along with the AFCOs, we're finally gonna go ahead and explain to you guys our issue with the brake offset that we're having and why we needed these SJM axle bearing spacers. All right, so we're gonna have to go ahead and pull off our brakes right now. All this stuff was just hand tight in order to mock up and get all the measurements that we required. All right, so gonna go ahead and pull this rotor off real quick. And I'm actually going to seat the bearing all the way down so we can start getting some measurements. All right, so the bearing's all the way flush in the housing right now. The way we check for brake offset is actually going to be measuring from the axle flange to the end of the axle right here. So the measurement I should be looking for is approximately 2.82. Right now we're sitting at about 2.65. And the reason being is that when the axle's sitting all the way flush, I don't know if you can see here, it's a little bit hard to see on the camera, but it's supposed to sit against this retention plate that Strange provides. Now, since it's sitting all the way flush, our brake offset isn't correct. So our rotors are hitting the caliper mount, and everything's just not really fitting right. So I'm gonna actually go ahead and smack the axle out. All right, now that I have that sitting against the retention plate, I'm gonna go ahead and measure our brake offset one more time. And from axle flange to the outside of the axle, we're sitting at 2.83 inches. So we had to go ahead and hit up SJM Manufacturing in order to get these axle bearing spacers, which is pretty much almost the exact length of that axle's protruding right there. To go ahead and install these, I'm going to go ahead and pull off the Strange retention plate so that we can go ahead and yank out the axle and put on that axle bearing spacer real quick. Bearing spacer from SJM, which sits in there. It's not an incredibly tight fit, but it doesn't need to be. Remember, this axle bearing is going to go ahead and slam up right against it. And as per the recommendation of a lot of people in the industry, I'm going to go ahead and throw a extremely light coat of RTV on this axle bearing. That way everything seals up nice in there. All right, now that we went ahead and threw an extremely light coat of RTV on this thing, we're ready to reinstall the axle. Since we already have the axle bearing spacer in there. Be extremely careful, as careful as we can be with that axle seal. Time we're in real light. Not that light, obviously, but we got that axle bearing sitting exactly where we need it to right now. All right, I already cleaned up all this residual RTV. We pretty much know the measurement's going to be correct, but obviously we're going to go ahead and check it one more time. So we're looking for 2.82. clearances of my cheap micrometer, I'd say we're right on the money. Now that we know our measurements are correct, I just gotta go ahead and install the caliper bracket, which is also the axle bearing retainer, and throw the brakes on. During the entire duration of this build so far, we've been talking about how lightweight stuff is. I can tell you one thing that's not lightweight, and that's this Moser 9. That thing is probably, what, Danny, like 300 pounds right now?
Easily.
And it doesn't even have the torque arm on it. So we got that thing set down right now. Gonna go ahead and throw the torque arm on it, so that way I can go ahead and throw a bolt up into the bracket once we start getting everything leveled and centered out there, so we can get the rear end thrown up in the car. All right, so we already got the rear end on the ground now. We went ahead and threw the wheels on it. Just gonna make it a little bit easier for us to go ahead and line everything up once we lower the car down. And everything's looking pretty nice on it. Everything's nice and clean already. So I'm gonna set up the time lapse while we go ahead and line up the rear end. All right, guys, behind me, the bird has all 4 wheels on. This is a huge moment. I've been waiting for this, you know, what seems to be like a month and a half. The car's been up in the air right now. So we got all 4 wheels on it. Only a couple lugs on each wheel right now because the front studs are actually different than our old ones. So, you know, we needed to use a couple from the rear to make them fit up here. So I'll let you do the honors, Danny.
Let's set her down.
Bump it up and get the locks. That thing's pretty low, man. Yeah. There's no engine in it right now. I wish the lift would come down a little bit faster, but working what we got here.
She's very light.
Yeah, don't weigh very much right now.
We jump in or she'll come down a little quicker.
I'm not trying to jump in it right now. So, just judging by this front end, it's entirely way too low to come off a lift, so we're gonna go ahead and put a jack underneath the K-member just to get the lift arms out. Let's set this front jack down.
Leave it to John to go ahead and stand some race car.
All right. So this ride height is a little bit lower than expected, and I would expect we have at least 500 or 600 pounds between engine and turbo setup and everything like that going up front. I weigh 289. I ain't a small boy, so I'm gonna go ahead and jump in here just to see how low this thing goes. That is ridiculous. That is, how low is this? I can't even see it right now.
It's pretty low. It's pretty low. Now let's complete the weight of the setup now.
Yeah, this is gonna be about 600. Oh my god. Dude, the crash bars are on the floor.
Are they?
The crash bars are on the floor.
Look at the toe marks on the ground.
As you can tell, we might need a ride height adjustment. That's obviously a little bit lower than I'm expecting. We're definitely gonna have to add a little bit more preload on those strange coils to get the front end up a little bit. Because keep in mind, while that might look pretty cool if we had a motor and the turbo setup and everything in it, it's obviously gonna drop down probably another 2 inches by the time all that stuff is in it. But I think that qualifies as a roller.
I would say so.
So I already made the call to AC Carcraft, our chassis shop. As of Friday, we're gonna have a firm date as to when this thing goes to chassis. We're not expecting more than 3 or 4 weeks out. So the last things we actually have to do are go ahead and pull the glass front and rear, since we're going Lexan with optic armor. The roof, the sail panel has to come off, and I think that's it.
I'm having fun rolling the car.
I understand that. I'm 99% sure that's all we have left to do. With that, I don't really know what else to close this episode out with, but the damn thing's finally on the ground. As you can tell, we have a hell of a mess in the shop. We're gonna go ahead and clean that up. Until then, we'll catch you guys next time.